If you are looking at your brokerage account this morning and feeling sick, you are witnessing the end of a 20-year financial era in real time. The opening bell on Wall Street wasn't just a start to the trading week, it was the sound of a structural pillar of the global economy snapping. At 9:35 a.m. Eastern Time, the S&P 500 triggered a level 1 circuit breaker. Trading was halted immediately as the index plummeted 7% in minutes. Traders on the floor of the NYSE stood in stunned silence watching the screens. The algorithms that usually buy the dip were aggressively selling into the void. But this crash didn't start in New York, and it didn't start with bad earnings. It started yesterday in Tokyo with a political earthquake that changed everything. Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi secured a landslide victory in Sunday's snap election. Her coalition now has a supermajority to execute her radical Japan First agenda. For decades, Japan has been the passive, polite banker to the Western world. They exported their savings to us and bought our debt to keep their yen weak. That arrangement officially ended last night when Takaichi gave her victory speech. She declared that Japanese capital must return home to rebuild the Japanese nation. The bond market heard her loud and clear and immediately went into cardiac arrest. Japanese government bond yields surged to 0.75%, the highest level in decades. This might sound like a small number to you, but it is a massive financial shock. It destroys the mathematics behind the most popular trade on Wall Street today. For years, hedge funds have used the yen carry trade as a free money machine. They borrowed trillions of yen at 0% interest to buy American tech stocks. They essentially used Japan's credit card to speculate on Nvidia and artificial intelligence. But now, the bill for that credit card has arrived, and the interest rate just spiked. This triggered a global margin call that is liquidating portfolios across the planet. Hedge funds are being forced to sell their U.S. assets to pay back their yen loans. They aren't selling Apple because they think the iPhone is suddenly a bad product. They are selling Apple because they are insolvent and need cash to cover their debts. We are seeing a forced liquidation event where price is irrelevant to the seller. The selling is mechanical, automated, and completely insensitive to fundamental value. This is why the Nasdaq is crashing, even though corporate earnings were solid. The liquidity that inflated the bubble is being sucked back to Tokyo instantly. The Japanese yen is strengthening vertically against the US dollar right now. It has broken through the 135 level, crushing the profits of US multinationals. Every time the yen ticks higher, the S&P 500 ticks lower in a deadly correlation. The two markets are locked in a death spiral that the Federal Reserve cannot stop. Jerome Powell is watching this from Washington, and he is powerless to intervene. The Fed can print dollars, but they cannot print yen to satisfy these margin calls. If they cut rates to save the market, they weaken the dollar and make inflation worse. If they raise rates to defend the dollar, they crush the economy even further. They are trapped in a checkmate position created by the Bank of Japan's pivot, and the damage isn't limited to stocks. The credit markets are freezing up too. We are receiving reports that the commercial paper market has gone no bid. This means major corporations cannot borrow short-term cash to pay their bills. The plumbing of the financial system is clogged with toxic, unwinding leverage. Banks are hoarding cash because they don't know which hedge fund will blow up next. This is the definition of a credit crunch, and it stops the real economy cold. Small businesses will wake up tomorrow and find their lines of credit cut. The contagion is spreading faster than the regulators can organize a response. We have learned that the U.S. Treasury Secretary is on an emergency call with Japan. They are likely begging Tokyo to intervene and stop the yen from rising further, but Takaichi was elected to strengthen the yen and lower import costs for her people. She has no political incentive to bail out American stock market speculators today. This diplomatic disconnect is what makes this crash different from 2008 or 2020. In previous crises, the world's central banks coordinated to save the system. Today, Japan is choosing its own survival over the stability of Wall Street. The Takaichi Shock exposes how dependent we were on cheap foreign capital. We built an entire economy on the assumption that Japan would never change. That assumption was wrong, and the repricing of risk is violent and painful. The Magnificent Seven tech stocks have lost $2 trillion in market cap. Retail investors who bought the top are seeing their accounts wiped out today. The buy and hold strategy works until the liquidity tide goes out completely. Crypto markets are also collapsing as speculative fervor turns into panic. Bitcoin has crashed through $60,000 as leverage is flushed out of the system. Gold, usually a safe haven, is being sold to raise cash for margin calls. In a liquidity crisis, investors sell what they can, not what they want to. This correlation of one, where everything falls together, is the hallmark of a crash. There is nowhere to hide except in physical cash and short-term government bills. The VIX, the fear gauge of the market, has exploded to levels not seen since 2020. It is signaling extreme distress and a complete lack of confidence in the future. We are watching a deleveraging event that will take weeks, not days, to resolve. Trillions of dollars of phantom wealth are evaporating into thin air right now. The The pension funds that were shorting volatility are getting crushed by the spike. This will have long-term consequences for the retirement security of millions. But the immediate danger is the potential failure of a major financial institution. Rumors are swirling about a large, multi-strategy hedge fund facing insolvency. If a major player fails, the counterparty risk could freeze the banking system. This is the Lehman moment that everyone is terrified of, and it is possible. The banks are frantically checking their exposure to yen-funded trading desks. Risk managers are liquidating positions first and asking questions later. This aggressive risk management is adding fuel to the fire of the sell-off. The algorithms are reading the panic and amplifying it with high-frequency trading. You are watching machines trade against machines in a race to the bottom. Human traders are largely spectators in this digital destruction of wealth. The New York Stock Exchange has invoked Rule 48 to speed up the opening. But even with faster processing, the order imbalances are too massive to handle. We are seeing stocks open down 20% on massive volume spikes. This is capitulation, the point where hope is abandoned for pure survival. The media is blaming the crash on technical factors to keep you calm. But this is not technical. It is fundamental, geopolitical, and structural. It is the unwinding of the everything bubble that was funded by Japan. The cheap money that fueled the housing market, the tech boom, and crypto is gone. It has been replaced by expensive money in a hostile bond market environment. The 10-year U.S. Treasury yield is spiking because Japan isn't buying anymore. This will push mortgage rates toward 8% by the end of the week. The housing market, already teetering, will be the next domino to fall hard. But right now, the focus is on the screen and the red numbers flashing. The plunge protection team is likely active, trying to stabilize the index. But they are fighting a tsunami with a bucket, and the waves are huge. The capital flows leaving the U.S. for Japan are estimated at billions per hour. You cannot fight a capital flight of this magnitude with words or speeches. You need a fundamental change in policy, and the Fed is not ready to pivot. Jerome Powell's higher for longer narrative just collided with reality. He will be forced to cut rates, but the market might not care anymore. A rate cut now would look like panic, and panic breeds more panic instantly. The credibility of the Federal Reserve is on the line, and it is fraying. Investors are realizing that the Fed put does not exist for currency crises. The Fed cannot fix a problem that originates in the Japanese Ministry of Finance. This loss of faith in the central bank is the most dangerous development. If the market stops believing the Fed can save it, the bottom falls out. We are staring into the abyss of a market that has lost its anchor. The anchor was the stable Japanese yen, and it has come loose in the storm. The ship is drifting, the waves are crashing, and the crew is panicking. You need to brace yourself for what is coming in the next few hours. The trading day is only halfway over, and the selling pressure is intensifying. Mutual funds will have to sell at the close to meet investor redemptions. This end-of-day selling could push the market into a level 2 halt. If we hit negative 13%, the market closes for the day. That hasn't happened in decades, but today feels like history in the making. The psychological damage of a double-digit loss day is permanent and scarring. It changes risk appetite for a generation of investors who only knew up. The Gen Z traders who entered the market in 2021 are facing their first crash. They are learning the hard lesson that leverage works both ways, brutally. Though our Wall Street bets crowd is silent today as their options expire worthless. The casino is closed and the lights have been turned on by the police. The party is over and the hangover is going to be severe and long. In part 2, we will look at the specific banks that are most exposed. We will name the institutions that are rumored to be in trouble tonight. And we will explain how the Takaichi Shock will impact your personal bank account. The contagion is moving from Wall Street to Main Street as we speak. Do not think this is just a game for rich people with brokerage accounts. This impacts the credit lines of your employer and the safety of your job. We are entering a new phase of the crisis, and you must be ready. The Japanese just rewrote the rules of the global economy without asking us. Now we have to play by their rules, and the game is rigged against us. Stay tuned, stay liquid, and do not look away from the reality. If you thought the chaos on Wall Street was just numbers on a screen, you're about to feel the impact in your own checking account very soon. In part 1, we explained how the Japanese carry trade unwind crashed the stock market. Now we need to name names and tell you exactly who is holding the toxic bag. The biggest secret on Wall Street right now is the solvency of regional banks. These are the mid-sized lenders that power the real economy of Main Street America. They are currently sitting on a ticking time bomb of commercial real estate debt. Over $1 trillion of these loans are maturing in 2026 and need refinancing. For the last 5 years, these banks relied on cheap liquidity to keep these loans alive. They borrowed money indirectly from the Japanese yield arbitrage to fund local deals. That funding source just evaporated overnight with the Takaichi Shock in Tokyo. Now, the cost of capital for these regional banks has doubled in less than 24 hours. We have obtained a leaked internal memo from a major U.S. investment bank today. It explicitly warns of a systemic credit event hitting regional lenders by Friday. The memo lists 35 specific banks that have critical exposure to the unhedged yen. These banks use currency swaps to lower their funding costs, and those swaps just blew up. If you bank with a regional lender that has heavy exposure to office buildings, you need to be paying very close attention to their stock price tomorrow morning. The KRE Regional Banking ETF crashed 15% today, signaling massive distress. This is not just about stock prices, it is about the safety of your deposits above the limit. The FDIC is already scrambling to assemble bid packages for failed institutions. They know that by the end of this week, we could see multiple bank failures announced. But the contagion isn't just stopping at the banks, it is hitting the shadow banks too. We are talking about the private credit funds that have lent billions to risky companies. These funds are completely unregulated and have zero backstop from the Federal Reserve. They are facing a wave of redemption requests from panicked investors wanting out. To meet these redemptions, they have to call in their loans to small businesses immediately. This is that credit crunch that will empty the storefronts on your local Main Street. Your local bakery, the construction company, and the car dealership rely on these lines. Tomorrow morning, many of them will wake up to find their credit lines frozen or cut. This is how a financial crisis becomes an economic depression in the blink of an eye. It destroys the working capital that businesses need to pay payroll and buy inventory. And it gets worse when you look at the consumer credit market in this country. Credit card companies are reacting to the liquidity crisis by slashing limits aggressively. Algorithms are scanning your credit report right now to see if you are a risk. If you have a high balance or missed a payment, your card might be declined tomorrow. They are trying to reduce their exposure to the American consumer before the layoffs start. And make no mistake, the layoffs are coming as a direct result of this market crash. Corporate treasurers are watching their stock prices tank and initiating cost-saving plans. In corporate speak, cost saving means firing people to preserve cash for the balance sheet. We expect to see a wave of WARN notices filed in the tech and finance sectors next week. The white-collar recession we discussed in previous reports is about to accelerate. But the most terrifying aspect of this crash is the geopolitical angle behind it. We need to talk about why Prime Minister Takaichi pulled the trigger right now. Intelligence sources suggest this was a calculated move to reassert Japanese sovereignty. For decades, Japan was treated as a vassal state of the U.S. financial system. They were expected to buy our debt and keep their currency weak to help our exports. Takaichi ran on a platform of national dignity and ending the subservience to Washington. She knows that by crashing the carry trade, she is hurting the U.S. just before an election. This gives her massive leverage to renegotiate trade deals and defense treaties. She is effectively holding the U.S. economy hostage to get what she wants for Japan. And the White House is furious because they have no good options to fight back. If the president imposes sanctions on Japan, he destroys the military alliance in Asia. If he does nothing, the U.S. economy slides into a deep recession on his watch. This is 4D chess, and the United States government is currently in checkmate. The Treasury Secretary's desperate call to Tokyo was reportedly met with a polite refusal. The Japanese finance minister simply stated that markets must find their true price. That is diplomatic code for, "We are not going to save you this time, America." So where does the capital go when it flees the United States and Europe? It is flowing back into domestic Japanese assets, and surprisingly, into gold. Gold is acting as the only neutral reserve asset in a world of weaponized currencies. Central banks around the world are dumping dollars to buy gold bars in panic. They see what is happening to the U.S. bond market and they want no part of it. The exorbitant privilege of the U.S. dollar is being challenged like never before. You are witnessing the fragmentation of the global financial order in real time. The world is splitting into blocks, and capital is no longer free to move between them. This means that your diversification strategy of owning international stocks is failing. When the liquidity tide goes out, all boats stranded on the sand look exactly the same. The correlation of 1 means that emerging markets are crashing even harder than the U.S. countries like Brazil and Mexico that hold dollar debt are facing imminent default. This global instability will blow back onto the U.S. banking system through loan losses. It is a vicious feedback loop that has no obvious off-ramp or circuit breaker. The only entity that can stop this is the Federal Reserve, but they are paralyzed. Inflation is still sticky at 3%, and cutting rates now risks hyperinflation. If Powell cuts rates to save the banks, the dollar could collapse against the yen. A collapsing dollar means import prices skyrocket, destroying the middle-class standard of living. Gasoline, food, and electronics would double in price within months of a dollar crash. So the Fed has to choose. Save the banks or save the currency? History tells us they usually try to save the banks first and worry about currency later. This means quantitative easing is coming back, but under a new confusing name. They will call it liquidity support or market functioning facility to hide the truth. But the truth is, they are going to print trillions of dollars to buy toxic assets. This printing will dilute your savings and reduce the purchasing power of your wages. You are paying for the bailouts of the hedge funds through the hidden tax of inflation. This is why you need to be looking at hard assets that cannot be printed by fiat. Real estate, precious metals, and commodities are the only hedge against this debasement. But be careful with real estate, because the commercial sector is a falling knife. Residential real estate might hold up better, but only if you have a fixed rate mortgage. If you have a variable rate loan, you need to lock it in immediately or sell. The volatility in interest rates is going to bankrupt anyone who is exposed to the float. We are also seeing a disturbing trend in the repo market this afternoon. The repo market is where banks lend to each other overnight to stay solvent. Rates in the repo market just spiked to levels that indicate extreme stress and mistrust. Banks are refusing to accept U.S. Treasuries as collateral because of the volatility. When U.S. Treasuries are rejected as collateral, the entire system stops working. This is the financial equivalent of a heart attack, and the patient is on the table. The plunge protection team is undoubtedly working the phones right now. They are likely pressuring major banks to buy stocks to create a floor under the market. But artificial buying can only hold back the tide for a few hours or days. Eventually, the sheer volume of selling from Japan will overwhelm any manipulation. We estimate there is still $500 billion of carry trade positions left to unwind. That is $500 billion of forced selling that has to hit the market in the coming days. This means we have not seen the bottom yet, not by a long shot. The dead cat bounce might happen tomorrow, but do not be fooled by it. It is a trap designed to suck in retail investors before the next leg down. The smart money is using any rally to exit their positions and raise cash. You should be doing the same, raising cash and reducing your risk profile. Now is not the time to be a hero or to try and catch a falling knife. Now is the time to survive so that you have capital left when the dust settles. In part 3, we will discuss the end game of this crisis and the New World Order. We will look at what a Takaichi world looks like for the American consumer, and we will give you the specific survival guide for the next 30 days of chaos, because the rules of the game have changed, and the old playbook is useless. You need a new strategy for a world where the U.S. is no longer the only boss. The Japanese have reminded us that creditors always have power over debtors, and America is the biggest debtor in the history of the human race. The bill collector has arrived, and she is speaking Japanese. Stay tuned for the final chapter of this report. If the financial horror movie we are watching has a final act, then this chapter is the survival guide you need to escape the theater. We have established that the Japanese yen has broken the global market, but now we must discuss the endgame and what life looks like in the wreckage. The Takaichi world we have entered is fundamentally hostile to American debt. For 40 years, we enjoyed a standard of living subsidized by foreign creditors. We bought cheap electronics and cheap mortgages with borrowed money. That era of imported deflation is over, and the bill has finally come due. In this new reality, the United States is no longer the undisputed king. We are a debtor nation that has alienated its biggest and most loyal banker. The shift in power dynamics means that Washington can no longer dictate terms. When the Treasury needs to sell bonds next week, they will have to beg. To attract those buyers, they will have to offer much higher interest rates. This means the interest on the national debt will explode and crowd out everything. The government will have to choose between funding the military or Social Security. They cannot afford both in a world where interest rates are set by enemies. This is the fiscal dominance trap that economists have warned about for decades. It forces the Federal Reserve to monetize the debt by printing money to pay bills. This printing will not be the low inflation variety we saw in the past. It will be the high inflation variety, because supply chains are now broken. Japanese goods are now 20% more expensive due to currency shifts. China is also raising prices, sensing American weakness and desperation today. This means you are facing a cost of living crisis that makes 2022 look mild. The price of a Toyota Camry or a Sony PlayStation is about to skyrocket. But the pain isn't just in imported goods, it is in the service economy too. As capital flees, businesses will stop investing in new technology and expansion. This leads to stagflation, where the economy shrinks but prices keep rising. It is the nightmare scenario that destroys the middle-class savings rapidly. Your paycheck will buy less every single month while your job security vanishes. So what is the survival strategy for the next 30 days of this chaos? You need a personal austerity plan to weather the immediate storm hitting now. The first step is to aggressively hoard cash in short-term Treasury bills. Do not keep more than the FDIC limit in any single regional bank account. Spread your liquidity across the too big to fail banks like JP Morgan Chase. They are the only institutions that the government will explicitly bail out. The second step is to audit your variable rate debt and kill it immediately. If you have a credit card balance, sell assets to pay it off today. Interest rates on cards could jump to 30% as banks panic. The third step is to secure your physical supply chain for essential goods. If you need prescription meds or specific imported items, buy a 3-month supply. Disruptions in trade financing could leave store shelves empty of foreign products. The just-in-time inventory system is collapsing as we speak due to credit risk. The fourth step is to reconsider your employment stability and have a plan B. If you work in a sector dependent on cheap debt like tech or real estate, you are in the blast zone and you need to update your resume tonight. Look for industries that are countercyclical like defense healthcare or utilities. These sectors tend to perform better when the broader economy is crashing down. The fifth step is to protect your long-term wealth with hard assets. We mentioned gold before, but we must emphasize its importance again today. Gold is the only asset that is not a liability on someone else's balance sheet. When the bond market breaks, gold becomes the collateral of last resort. Central banks are buying it, and you should be following the smart money. Bitcoin is also a potential lifeboat, but it is currently highly volatile. Only allocate what you can afford to lose, as it trades like a tech stock. Now, let's look at the geopolitical consequences of the Takaichi Shock. Japan's move is a signal to the rest of the world that the US is weak. China is watching this financial chaos with extreme interest and calculation. If the US economy is crippled by a debt crisis, our military is paralyzed. We cannot fund a war in the Pacific if we cannot sell bonds to fund it. This increases the risk of a conflict over Taiwan significantly in the near term. A financial crisis often precedes a kinetic war, as nations get desperate. You need to be mentally prepared for a world that is much more dangerous. The Pax Americana was built on the strength of the US dollar and debt. With the bond market broken, the peace that it bought is also fracturing. This is why we call it a new world order led by the creditor nations. The nations that produce things and save money are now calling the shots. The nations that consume things and borrow money are now taking orders. America is about to learn the hard lesson of living within its means. It will be a painful adjustment that will change our culture and politics. The entitlement era is over because the credit card has been declined. We will see massive cuts to government programs and social safety nets. The austerity that Europe faced in 2011 is coming to America in 2026. This will lead to civil unrest and political polarization on a massive scale. You need to be aware of your local environment and stay safe during protests. The Black Monday crash is just the opening ceremony of this new era. The volatility will continue for months as the deleveraging process plays out. Do not try to buy the dip, thinking this is a standard correction. This is a repricing of reality, and reality is much more expensive now. The algorithms will try to trick you with fake rallies to steal your cash. Stay disciplined, stay defensive, and do not let FOMO drive your decisions. The winners of the next decade will be the ones who survive this year. Preservation of capital is the only goal that matters right now. If you keep your powder dry, you'll be able to buy assets for pennies. Real estate stocks and businesses will go on sale for those with cash. This is the greatest transfer of wealth in history from the reckless to the prudent. Be on the right side of that transfer by being patient and calculated. The Japanese have taught us a masterclass in patience and long-term thinking. They waited 20 years to make their move and they executed it perfectly. Now we must learn from them and adopt a similar mindset of resilience. The storm is here, the roof is leaking, and the floodwaters are rising. But if you have followed this guide, you have a boat and a map. You know where the safe harbor is, and you know how to get there. Do not be distracted by the noise of the media or the politicians. Focus on the signal the yen is up, the dollar is down, and debt is toxic. The Federal Reserve will likely try to pivot and cut rates in panic. But cutting rates when inflation is high is like pouring gas on a fire. They will try to save the bond market, but they will destroy the currency. You need to watch the dollar index DXY very closely in the coming days. If the DXY breaks below the 100 level, the inflation genie is out of the bottle. That is your signal to move out of cash and into tangible hard assets. Do not wait for the official announcement because by then it is too late. The market moves faster than the press release and you must be ahead. We are also watching the oil markets for signs of further stress. If the dollar falls, oil prices will rise and crush the consumer at the pump. This is the double whammy of currency debasement and commodity scarcity. It is why we recommend keeping your gas tank full and your pantry stocked. Small actions taken today can save you massive headaches tomorrow morning. Do not panic, but do not be complacent in the face of this data. The banking system is fragile, and the trust is eroding very quickly. If you see lines forming at your local bank, do not wait to act. We must also address the rise of central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. The government will likely offer a digital dollar as the solution to the crisis. They will promise safety and speed, but they will demand total control. This crisis is the perfect pretext to introduce a programmable currency. Be very careful about accepting these new digital tokens from the Fed. They could come with expiration dates or restrictions on what you can buy. This is why decentralized assets like Bitcoin have a value proposition. They are outside the control of the state and cannot be programmed. But remember that the government will fight to maintain its monopoly. Regulatory crackdowns on crypto on-ramps are likely coming very soon. You need to have multiple ways to access your wealth if banks close. Self-custody is not just a slogan, it is a survival necessity now. The digital walls are closing in, and you need to keep a door open. We are entering a period of financial repression and capital controls. They will try to trap your money in the system to fund their debts. Your job is to legally move your money to safety before the gates shut. Look at jurisdictions outside of the G7 that respect property rights. Diversification is no longer just about asset classes. It is about geography. We also need to talk about the importance of your local community. When the global system fails, the local system becomes your lifeline. Get to know your neighbors and build relationships based on trust. Barter networks and local trade will become essential if cash fails. The person who grows food is more valuable than the person who trades stocks. Skills are the ultimate currency in a world where money is broken. Invest in your ability to fix things, build things, and grow things. These are the skills that cannot be inflated away or taxed into oblivion. We are seeing a return to the tangible economy of real things. The financialization of everything has failed, and we are reverting to basics. This is a healthy correction in the long run, but painful in the short run. You need to have the mental fortitude to endure the transition period. Do not let fear paralyze you into inaction or bad decision-making. Fear is a reaction, but courage is a decision you make every day. You have the power to protect your family and your future right now. It requires action, discipline, and a willingness to go against the herd. The herd is currently panicking and selling at the absolute bottom. Do not be part of the herd. Be the predator that waits for opportunity. The Japanese have made their move and the Americans are reacting. Now it is your turn to make your move before the window closes. The wealth of the nation is being reshuffled and you need a seat. Do not be left standing when the music stops and the chairs are gone. The chairs are hard assets, skills and liquidity in a safe jurisdiction. Everything else is just paper promises that are currently burning. We will look back on this day as the turning point of the century, the day the yen broke the world and the new order began. You are living through history and you have a front row seat. Make sure you're not just a spectator but an active participant. Take control of your financial destiny and do not delegate it. The government cannot save you and the banks will not save you. You must save yourself and you have the tools to do it. Stay focused, stay liquid, and keep your eyes on the horizon. The storm is raging, but the sun will eventually rise again. We will be here to guide you through the darkness until then. This concludes our special investigative report on the Black Monday crash. We will continue to monitor the situation and bring you updates daily. The world has changed forever today, and there is no going back. We must move forward with eyes wide open and wallets tightly closed. If you want to stay ahead of the collapse and protect your wealth, subscribe to the channel right now and turn on notifications immediately.